Hey, welcome into the podcast. This is Jake Jordan, your host of The Productive Point of View. And this is the show where we take people who are doing great business and break down their day and understand the things they do to leverage their time just to be more productive in their marketing activities. So I am privileged to have with me today somebody I actually just met recently here. I believe it was over at Buffer Inbound somewhere where we just got to chatting. His name is Louis Grenier. That's my American version of saying your name. Louis, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for having me. Louis Grenier, but it's tough for anybody outside of France to pronounce it. I don't do it at all.
Yeah, I'll just, it's not my cup of tea is pronunciation. So I'm
just
happy to admit it. Louis,
okay.
Louis from everyonehatesmarketers.com. That's a great name, man. Where'd you come up with that?
It's not me, actually. I asked on a few Slack channels. I was explaining the concept and I was like, okay, I need a name. I feel there's a concept there, but I can't find a good name. Mm-hmm. And somebody, actually her name is Cassandra, came up with the name, told it to me like as naturally as she could. And I was like, at him basically in his head until he dies. The way he did that was by using his skills, doing a few bits, doing a few actions to deliver on the strategy. So that's my long answer to say, yeah, being productive means to me being able to deliver on your strategy.
Okay, I think that's a pretty straightforward definition. So based on that, one of the other things we always like to talk about really specifically in kind of your day-to-day as a marketer is what are the biggest kind of challenges that you're running into to deliver, like you said, every day?
Like from the outside, a few people are tell me that I seem to be executing quite a lot and doing a lot of things, but I definitely don't feel this way at all.
Yeah.
I have two things going on. I have a very short attention span. I really struggle to focus. So I had to buy this app on Google Chrome to prevent me from going on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Yeah.
That actually blocks you from going there, because that's how, that's how your brain works. Because that's, you get bored and that's what you do. So, and then I have my Pomodoro app as well to force me to go through 25-minute cycles. But I'm like, to be honest with you, if I do 3 hours of productive work every day, that's kind of what I would be happy with. And what I mean by productive work is genuinely like actual work, working on stuff. So yeah, I'm not the best at it, but I think I manage because I think I have a good strategy. Like I know what I need to do. At least I focus on doing that, and I don't get too much like distraction from anywhere else.
So distraction's a big one for a lot of people. I mean, smartphones come up a lot, Facebook comes up a lot, things like that. Yeah. What would you say, because you're trying to help people get out of the distraction of, the crappy stuff that they could be focused on, almost the shiny stuff out there in marketing. How do you keep yourself distracted from some of that? Because we're not immune to that, right?
Yeah. So the first thing to say is that I don't blame people doing it. I mean, I completely understand why, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm not trying to say like you're bad for practicing bad marketing. Far from it. I just think it's not really a choice for most people, because they work in businesses that have leaders that don't understand that good marketing is what matters. But having said that, as I said from the start, I think once you have a strategy that is really clear, and I think the clarity is very important. Once you exactly know where you're going and why you're doing that, and the key strengths and the key weaknesses, I think then it's much easier to focus on the day-to-day. But I still have the fear of missing out most days. I'm like, am I doing the right thing, right? So I'm questioning my choices quite a lot. But I've learned in the last few years to know what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, and focusing on what I'm good at. So no, I'm not going to try to lie and say, hey, I've figured it out. I haven't. But I think I'm improving slightly every day.
So clarity, that's huge, man. I think that's a revolving circle that you just keep working on, right? Through life. It's getting more and more clear who you are and what you're good at. And so specifically for you, like what are some specific clarity challenges that you run into? I mean, I know mine. I could start and list 100, but
me too. The biggest thing at the minute that I'm really questioning is, so podcasting is something I really enjoy, and talking to people like you and having discussion like this is something I really enjoy. But I spend an awful amount of time on Facebook, Reddit, LinkedIn, Twitter, not doing much actually, like kind of lurking and reading, but half reading. And because I have a very short attention span, I never really end up reading. Like I always feel like I'm scanning through stuff instead of going through them in detail. So I think I'm going to have to take decisions pretty fast into choosing actually to stop using those sites altogether and focus on 2 or 3 things to do. So podcasting is one of them. And then I want to get better at writing. So I might replace my time on social media by just writing stuff, sharing them, but without necessarily having to look at the number of people visiting the page every single day. No, but that's the other thing. It's so tough nowadays to not look at numbers. Like it's crazy, isn't it? You publish something and then 10 minutes after you like check it, 20 minutes after, 30 minutes after.
Yeah, that's crack.
But it's okay, because that's how our brains is wired. So it's not like I don't think people should blame themselves. It's just the way we are. We just need to work on it. So to answer your question, to stay focused, I think it's about saying no to most things and yes to a small number of things, isn't it?
I think that's really true. Because I know for me, I've been a marketing strategist for years. That's just been my title, and that's really big and vague. Even to people in the industry, they go, "Great, what are you good at?" and that sort of thing. And so I know for me, social media, very much so. One of the big things I talk about in my blog is marketers are the king of knowing way too much. We don't use 10% of what we already know. And so I think that alone can, I think you're a great example of that, is right. We spend time lurking and reading when we should be, contributing or writing. Creating. I think that's great. And, Gary V, who everyone knows and to some degree, right? I've actually have his a wallpaper on my phone right now of his that says "Stop focusing on dumb." It's just I look at it, I go, "Duh." Put down the thing I'm doing.
It's funny because this kind of that would strike anybody as common sense, right? But for some reason, we have to have other people to tell us that, to repeat that every day almost to keep doing it. But it's about clarity, isn't it? Gary Vee is able to clarify, to actually get very clear and very important concepts with his own words. I think that's what matters. That's why politics are struggling at the minute, because they can't be clear. They have to use very expensive words and doesn't make any sense for people.
Very true. Yeah. And then of course the lying is a big part of it. So, but that's another podcast, right? So, man, there's so much to go on there. Let's talk about accountability for a second, because for me, environmental design is what I call it. Kind of what you talked about earlier, like apps that won't let you on the Facebook. For me, timers, like a Pomodoro timer, things like that are all really great tools for me. I always like to tell the story of I hate flossing. And so a guy that writes about habits that I really like said, put the little the little pre-done flosser things on top of your bathroom counter. And that way, when you walk in, it's just a mental reminder. Oh yeah, I've got no excuse. It's right there. It's pretty strong. Yeah. So as many of those things, but on top of that still relies on your own willpower to get the stuff done, right? Not being distracted. So accountability is a huge thing in making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So for you, what does that look like? Who or what helps keep you accountable about these business goals that you have?
That's something I've started to do, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So when I started my own consulting business, what I started to do was to actually share what I was planning to do to others before they were started. So I would talk to friends of mine, and I would say, you know what, next week I'm going to start doing this, right? And just the act of actually voicing them out and say, by next week there will be a blog post ready, or there will be something ready, actually made me really much more willing to do stuff on time and do them and not avoid them. So I think that's the one thing that I use all the time. I've done it recently for the podcast that I launched. I actually announced that I was launching it in April. I made it official 2 months before, and then nothing was ready by then. But it forced me to stick to it, because a few people were waiting for it, and I just couldn't just delay it. So I think what's his name? I think David Levels from Nomad List. To make himself accountable, he actually codes live. He actually live stream his coding to force himself to work while other people are watching. Because you can't really Slack then. You can't really go on Facebook and Twitter and around for 20 minutes, can you?
No.
So I think that's the number one thing for me.
Wow. That's interesting. I did that actually this week. I put a post up on Instagram about a LinkedIn post I was going to put up the next day. And so I had no choice but then to go write it. So that's interesting. Do you have any sort of groups or specific people in your life that you rely on to keep you accountable as well?
Like my fiance, I would tell her some stuff sometimes, but she's not really into marketing. So I've kind of stopped getting into the specifics. But I have a few friends I would share what I'm planning to do. And then I have an email list. I don't have that many people on it, but still I like to announce stuff in advance to them and see how people reply. And then based on that, I would do it. But I need to, the question, the fact that we're having this conversation today actually made me realize that I kind of have to leverage that a little bit more. And maybe live streaming me writing blog posts, or live streaming myself doing something might be something, or the podcast itself might be interesting.
That's a good, I might try something like that too. That's a good idea. I'd never heard that. That's a brand new thing to me. So you've got this current gig, you've got stuff you've been doing, the consulting. I know you've got some stuff coming up that's pretty exciting. How do you prioritize what gets done in a day?
So I have a very simple system. So I told you before, I have the strategy, and usually what I do is I take an A4 piece of paper, blank, like nothing on it. And I just write down, this is the stuff that is going on. This is the situation. This is the strategy in one sentence. And this is the kind of the rough plan to go about it. And then every week, either on Sunday evening or Monday morning, I actually I take another piece of paper and I write down the top 5 things I need to do this week. And I just take the time to prioritize them in my head. I was like, okay, what is the biggest, ugliest frog I need to eat this week, basically, right? So I put that in number 1. I actually should have brought that. I could have showed you, but it's just very simple. I just always on the top, I write this week starting Monday or whatever.
Okay.
I put I draw a 1 and then I write down the project or the whatever, and then up to 5. And then if I have time, I also put bullet points of other things I could do if I have time.
Okay.
So that's every week. And then every day in the morning, I usually I like to wake up quite early and start this way. I take another piece of paper and actually write down for the day what I'm planning to do, like the top 3 things, right?
Okay.
And that's it. So there are some periods of my life where I'm much more productive and I seem to really get things done. Honestly, in the last few months, because I was almost burning out with my consulting gig, I was still doing the to-do list every day, but I could see that I wasn't achieving as much. So it's really about, I think in the long term, if I want to be productive long term, I have to learn to have a better life, work-life balance. It's all about the hustle, they say, but that's full of shit. I mean, you really, really need to have a life outside of what you're doing professionally, or else you're going to burn out. But that's usually what I do. And that worked. I've been doing that for years now. And that's really something that stuck with me. And usually routines are not really my thing, but this one has worked. Okay.
That's interesting that you say that because typically I know entrepreneurs do like some sort of routines. But I've seen that it's been kind of throughout their lives. They're maybe not like stringent, but they always kind of want to have a little plan for their vacation or a little plan for their whatever. But you're not like that in the rest of areas of your life, you feel like?
Depends on the period of my life, really.
Okay.
I seem to have some 6 months after 6 months. It's usually I'm very productive for 6 months and a little bit less for 6 months.
Yeah. Peaks and valleys. Yeah, I think that's pretty common. So cool. Well, Louis, last thing I want to kind of ask you here is for anybody who's listening, if you could talk to one listener right now and you could say, hey, so-and-so, tomorrow go out and do this and you will, number 1, get more done. Number 2, have better results kind of in your marketing because you're doing this thing. What's that one thing you think you would try and narrow down for somebody?
Talking to people. So that sounds stupid, but that's actually the greatest thing you can do. As a marketer, particularly, if we consider that this person is a marketer, I would challenge this person to talk to at least 1 customer a week, to do customer development interviews with them, to actually try to get to the bottom of who they are. Because so many digital marketers in particular were very used to work with Google Analytics and Intercom and Twitter and whatever, actually never talk to customers directly. And we are social animals. And even though you think you know them, you don't. And when you talk to them, you will get emotions, you will get their feelings, you will get the vibe. That's something that you will remember way more than looking at number of pages per session on analytics, I can guarantee. So I think that's a challenge that marketers should have and should start is like, I should talk to a customer at least once a week. And if they do that, face-to-face would be the best because you can see everything from the body language to creating a rapport and whatever. I think you become a better marketer, more productive because you know what to work on, what not to work on. That would be my number 1 advice.
That's excellent. I love that. And it's not something that anybody's really specifically mentioned. And I actually listened to your podcast. I think we talked a little bit beforehand. The founder or CEO, whoever, I forget his title, but David over at Hotjar. It's one of the things that he mentioned as well was that he spends a lot of time out talking to customers and a whole lot less time staring at analytics. And he has an analytics company, which is perfect irony, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not really an analytics. There is some analytics, but there's a lot of qualitative insights
Sure.
on Hotjar. So it would
Sure.
be a lot about, looking at how people behave. So it's kind of the bridging the gap between analytics and real life, I would say.
Sure.
But that's true. But yeah, it's all about listening to people. And that's something people forget because there is a screen between us now. And, we talk about audience instead of people. We talk about leads instead of people. We talk about traffic. I hate this word.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame people using it, but all of those words are, I think, a symptoms of a bigger thing, which is if you start to take a distance between the people, like if you start to not treat people as people, then you're gonna treat them as like something that you don't want to treat them, or at least certainly something that you don't want to be treated as yourself.
A transaction is what I think of. It's,
yes.
I think number is not specific enough. You treat them like a transaction or a cardboard cutout, right?
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit, you've been in conversion rate optimization, which is another term it's still brand new, but people like us in the industry, it's been around a while. And that's another thing that, people don't look at behavior. They look at, data a lot of times and miss the whole point of CRO, right?
Yeah, because sometimes talking to 5 people and looking at the way they behave on your website will tell you more than any type of A/B test or any type of analytics you can find.
Yep.
So, I mean, the good conversion rate optimizers, the leaders in the industry would do that first. They would do qualitative stuff instead of quantitative for sure. But I think there's a lot of misleading information around growth hacking and conversion rate optimization about like these little hacks that will make your leads turn into customer faster, whatever.
Everybody wants a shortcut,
Exactly.
And is it Seth Godin that says, I prefer the long cut? Like he's the first one that kind of.
Oh yeah, did you say that? I never heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I listened to, I think one of the podcasts you recommend with him where he was interviewed somewhere, and that's what he said it on that podcast.
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Yeah, I was on the Ferriss one. So great. So where can we find you? Like if somebody wants to come listen to you.
Everyone hates marketers.com.
Yep.
Simple as that. There's all my links. Like if you want to email me or follow me, it's all in there.
It'll all be in the blog down below this. So if you want, you can send me over a screenshot of your daily too. I can put it in there as well.
Yeah, I can scan it and send it to you.
Okay, great. Louis, man, I really appreciate the time. It was very interesting. So thanks for being on.
You're very welcome.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you.
All right, bye.